Should you use gear when you're cutting or save it for your growth phases? This is a question I've been asked a couple of times in the past week in one way or another. So I figured why not make a video about it. The answer is going to depend on a couple of different things. So I have basically two different answers. Really three answers if you count the non-answer of it depends and everybody's different and I don't recommend that anybody use gear in the first place. But aside from that, the two answers that I'm going to give are based on your individual circumstances. So the two sort of scenarios that I'll talk about would be the competitive bodybuilder and somebody who just works out and wants to make some gains, but they're not competing in any sport, not competing in bodybuilding. So in the competitive bodybuilder scenario, to be completely honest, if somebody's not natural and they're enhanced, they're using PEDs, they're going to be doing it year round anyway for the most part, with the exception of maybe, an 8 to 12 week health phase here and there. But speaking in terms of growth phases and cutting phases, competitive bodybuilder who's not natural is going to be using in both of those phases regardless. So the question then becomes, in which phase do you need more gear? And this might actually seem a little bit backwards compared to the way a lot of people do things. But to use an analogy here, if we talk about training, for example, we have these three levers that people always talk about in training. You have frequency, intensity, and volume. And you can't have them all dialed up at the same time, right? So if you have a scenario where maybe you decide you want to raise your intensity, you might want to lower your overall volume, or you might want to lower the frequency. And likewise, if you up the frequency, you might want to lower the intensity, for example, so you can recover better. You can't have everything dialed up at once. So to sort of transition from that analogy into the PED thing, if you're growing, which means you're in a position where if you did things right at least, you should be way more insulin sensitive, way more responsive to food. Your recovery, your sleep should all be better. You should have a lot more food than you did during your diet phase. So with all this anabolic signaling, food being higher, recovering being better, training stimulus should also be better due to these other factors. If you have all these levers that are raised up higher in that specific scenario, yeah, you're still going to be using gear, but it doesn't need to be quite as high because the signaling from all those other things is going to make up for that, right? Whereas when you're in a diet phase, your recovery is shit. Your training stimulus should still be upheld as much as you can, but it's not going to be like it is in the off season, right? Your food's going to be way lower, so you have less substance to work with in order to build muscle. All of the signaling that's going to be going on inside of your body is basically going to be telling you holding muscle is not important right now. What we need to do, is fight to survive, burn what we can, hold on to these fat stores. Everything's going to be worse, and in that scenario, all these other levers, the food, the training, the recovery, are all going to be down here. That's when you need to have the other lever that you have control of higher to make up for those other things, right? So in that scenario, that's when the gear would be higher, because now the anabolic signaling is going to be better, and it's going to make, or to an extent at least, it's going to make up for those other things being lower. Now, it doesn't mean you can just blast as much gear as you want and everything's just going to magically work fine and you're going to hold all your muscle and you don't have to train hard, etc. But I think you understand what I'm trying to say here. Now, moving on to the lifestyle client, the person who's just working out and they're not competing, maybe they're a little more health conscious because, they don't really stand to make money off their physique or whatever. They just want to be healthier. That person probably shouldn't be taking as many risks with their health as far as PED usage as a competitive bodybuilder would. So in that circumstance, you only have so much health to work with in the first place, right? Every time you use gear, you're going to be taking away some of your health or doing some damage to your health. If you think of it like a video game character, you have that power bar, right? You have your health bar, starts off at 100, and then you get hit a couple times by your opponent, and then it's 97, and then it's 90, right? If you think of it like injections of gear, every time you do an injection or, you take more gear, you're taking away from that health meter. So you want to use it strategically in order to reap the most benefit for for the least amount of risk and at least try to be as healthy as possible. And in that case, gear is for growing, right? So during your growth phases, and this is the answer that really applies to probably 99% of the people out there, use the gear in your growth phases and actually use it for what it's meant to do, which is to build muscle, right? You most likely don't need gear to hold on to your muscle while you're cutting, unless you're doing things very wrong, or if you're well beyond your genetic potential, like you're 250 pounds in stage lean, in which case you probably don't even need to be watching this video in the first place, right? So for 99% of people out there, if you're going to be using gear and you're trying to figure out if you should use it during a cut or during your growth phases, use it during your growth phases, right? Get lean, get extremely lean as you possibly can, to the point where your abs just look fucking diced without using gear, or on a cruise or whatever it is that you do. Then use the gear for the bulk when you're in a position to actually utilize all those nutrients to build muscle. Bulk to the point where, your abs are still somewhat visible, but you're kind of getting on the fatter side, and it's maybe time to dial things back. Drop the gear down to a cruise dose, or get rid of it altogether in PCT if that's your thing. Hold on to that for a month or two, and then go into another cut, and cut to the point where you're extremely lean again. If you did things right, you should be heavier than the previous time with more muscle on you. And then rinse and repeat. Now you're in a position to have a rebound, to put on a bunch of muscle because you're extremely insulin sensitive again. And you just keep rinsing and repeating, right? Cut hard, use the gear to bulk, take a break, dial things back, drop the gear, cut hard again, and just keep doing that until you're as jacked as you want to be. But the main point is, if you're not competing and you're trying to be somewhat health conscious, use the gear for growing, and just cut on TRT or natural if that's your thing. I just wanted to make that quick video because I was asked a couple times. I'm going to start posting more videos like this, so if you guys are interested in competitive bodybuilding and following my journey, or just learning about gear, training, all that stuff, nutrition, make sure to subscribe. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.